Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Sekani, a podcast for people in their 20s who are trying to figure out life and not get lost along the way. Today's guest is Jeff Thorne, a former tech executive who spent 45 years in technology leadership, a world defined by strategy, structure, and clear roadmaps. But alongside that career, Jeff and his wife spent 6 years retracing the historic Lewis and Clark Trail. What began as a simple historical curiosity slowly became something much deeper, a journey into love, reinvention, caregiving, and the uncertainty that often arrives in the second half of life. Through that experience, Jeff began reflecting on what happens when life no longer follows a clear map and how those moments can reshape identity, marriage, and purpose. Jeff, welcome to Conversations with Sekani. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Sekani. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
All right. So yeah, the beginning of the journey, right? So what first inspired you and your wife to retrace the, Lewis and Clark Trail?
Well, to start with, it was my idea.
Oh,
In fact, I had the idea even before my wife and I got married. I the story just resonated with me. You take 30 or 31 people and send them out into the wilderness for 3 years, basically. And they make it to the Pacific Ocean and back, and it's just this great romantic adventure, if you will. You know, the Western United States and all of the scenery. And so I was very interested in it. My wife and I got married, and I drug her along to a couple of stops. We were doing this during the 200th anniversary of when Lewis and Clark did it. And so there was these events at different spots along the road, and we went to a couple of them, and she fell in love with the story also. And so we made a commitment that over this time period we were going to visit as many sites as we could and try to be there 200 years to the day after they were there. And we did a pretty good job. We ended up taking, I think, 14 different trips and covered pretty much the entire trail from Monticello, Virginia, all the way to Astoria, Oregon, and back to St. Louis. It was quite an adventure.
wow. It was really an adventure, actually. I would like to, what was it like? The places you visited. Did you learn anything new? What was it like?
Oh, it was the experience was incredible, and each one of the trips probably had its own set of lessons. But I'd say some of the things we learned that really struck us and continue to stay with us is that the sacredness of the land
Mm,
and the hollowedness of the land, the indigenous peoples that were already residents of the land that Lewis and Clark traveled through. So I think the first lesson that we got out of this was to listen, to really listen to what the people were saying, the stories from the elders of some of the indigenous tribes, listen to what the land was trying to share and say. I mean, you stand at the confluence of the Missouri and the Mississippi River just outside of St. Louis, and the sheer power of the water as those two rivers join. And the Missouri River kind of becomes a character in our story during this time.
mm,
Following it because Lewis and Clark followed it to its source, and we did too. And so the other thing that we took away from it was this concept of history being a mirror. The story of Lewis and Clark of discovery became a mirror for our own journey, our own sense of discovery. Uh, we were newlyweds when we first started on this trip. We'd only been married about a year when we took the first trip out of the 14. And you lock yourself with another individual in a car, or in our case, an RV, for hours and hours and hours on end as you're traveling this road. You get to know each other pretty well. You get to know the good, the bad, the ugly, and I think you hinted at this in your introduction. I think those trips laid the foundation that we are relying on today in this season of life. And I think that's the other thing that we have learned is that sometimes there is no map. There is no chart of where you're going. There's no GPS. You have to figure it out like they did 200 and some years ago. You have to figure that out on your own.
Wow. The journey must have been like fun for you. I was trying to, imagine it, right? So yeah, talking about life with a map versus life without one, right? So your career in technology involved structure and planning. So
Yes.
what did the trail teach you about navigating life when the map disappears, basically?
That is such a great question because you're right. In technology, everything is about a framework, everything's about a plan. There are unexpected things, yes, but what this taught me, what this taught us, is that sometimes the greatest moments are the ones you don't plan for. We began to call them uncharted moments. These serendipitous things that happen because you are slowing down, you are off the beaten path, you're taking the time to listen and experience, and those moments run the gamut on these trips. But that's what it teaches us is that you don't always need that map, and uh, sometimes we're scared to let go of the map, right? We want to have a plan. We want to know what we're doing tomorrow. We want to know what we're doing later this week. And sometimes you just don't know because it's uncharted. Things happen. They surprise you. There was one time on one of our trips we were going through rural Pennsylvania, actually, on our eastern trip part of these trips, and was driving an RV, and I got too close to a cliff that was beside the road, and I hit my tire on it and blew out the tire on the RV. It took 5 hours to get it repaired. And we could have gotten angry, we could have gotten mad, we could have just been so frustrated, and we just kind of hung out and waited for the repair truck to show up. We had to modify our plan because we had planned to go all the way to Pittsburgh that night, and there's no way we were doing that. So we found a little campground outside Harrisburg and made a nice campfire and just enjoyed the moment, right? And I think that's so much of our journey is we try to plan it to the nth degree. We talk about the whole hustle culture and trying to get that next job, that next promotion. And sometimes you just need to sit by the campfire and watch the flames and maybe enjoy a beverage or two, and just kind of get that chill going, right?
Exactly. So one thing I can, pick from your experience is it gives room for love, right? It gives room for love, honestly.
Yes,
And yes, I'm very sure the
absolutely.
relationship, the bond must be so tight right now. Like it's unbreakable at this point. So
Well,
yeah.
and it's a second marriage for both of us, and I know a lot of your listeners are in their 20s, early 30s, and maybe they're married, maybe they're looking forward to marriage at some point. And sometimes life throws some things at you, and you have to adjust to that. We both went through divorces and found each other in midlife, and I think that's another lesson is. you don't give up hope, right? You don't give, we were both kind of struggling. What are we going to do? I mentioned that Lewis and Clark was my passion to begin with. I was divorced at the time when I fell in love with the story, and I was going to quit my job and I was going to canoe the entire Lewis and Clark Trail. I say that today and it sounds so freaking crazy, but I was going to do it. The walls of my apartment were covered with maps and contact information and all this stuff. And then I realized, there's no way, there is no way to replicate that today in a canoe. It's just yeah. So you adjust, right? But in the meantime, Carmen and I found each other. We were friends before we became into a relationship, and that friendship formed the foundation of our marriage, and then these trips forged it into iron and steel. And we need that today. Carmen is sick, and I am mostly retired. She jokes and says, "Why do you have to go to your office all the time if you're retired?" Well, I've got to go talk to Sekani, right? And But I retired to be her caregiver, and that is an entirely different chapter of life. That you dream about retirement one day, and this is not the retirement that we dreamed of. But we fall back on the relationship with each other, and even on the bad days. And trust me, there are bad days when I lose my patience, or she's not feeling well, or whatever it is. You fall back on this bond that has formed over the last 20, almost 25 years now. And That's what gets you through each day.
Okay, so talking about, caregiving and like identity, right? So many people, they reach a point in life where, caregiving becomes a part of their story, like yours, right? So how
Yeah.
can someone, care for others without losing themselves?
Boy, if I knew the answer to that one. But you're absolutely right. And so she got diagnosed mid 2023. And I would say for most of a year, I was lost. Who am I was a business executive. I was an executive at a tech company when all this happened. I had my own business of being a coach and leadership development expert, had written a couple of books, and now who am I? Right? Who is Jeff when all this happens? And I was really, really struggling. And you see on my backdrop, Uncharted Moments. It's a book that I've written that comes out in May. And for me, the experience of going back and writing about those early days of our relationship, it sounds silly to say, but it reminded me of who she is, right? She's still in there. She has this disease, but her heart, her soul is still in there. And it opened my eyes to kind of quit feeling sorry for yourself, do what you can do, and spend the time learning these new jobs, which caregiving is. It's a job, it's a chore, but you can't forget the person that you are giving care to. Yes, you have to take care of yourself, and every therapist on the planet will tell a caregiver you have to take care of yourself so that you can take care of them. The analogy is when you're on an airplane and they tell you to put your mask on first, right? Before you help somebody else. They tell that to caregivers all the time. That can be a challenge. Carving out time for yourself is difficult, and it ends up being it ends up being trade-offs, right? If you only have a certain number of hours in a day, sometimes 15 minutes, not even hours, for yourself, how are you going to spend it, right? Are you going to spend it scrolling through on LinkedIn or Facebook or TikTok or whatever? Are you going to spend it reading? Are you going to spend it writing? Are you going to go out and get some exercise? You have to pick, you have to choose because your time is severely limited. And this disease doesn't allow you to have a schedule, really, because you never know what's around that next corner. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. This you're operating without a map. You don't know what's around the next corner. You don't know that the GPS is going to tell you to turn right in 500 feet. You're just all of a sudden going to be turning right because the disease is telling you to turn right.
Yeah, I don't know. My heartfelt, sincere, should I say apology? But like, I don't know how to put it in words, right? But yeah, I enjoy and admire the relationship you had, right, with her. And I still enjoy what you have with her right
Yes,
now. It's not easy, right? But yes, the feeling of being able to sit down and reflect on moments you've had before, interesting
yes,
moments, it's powerful, right? So yes, thank you for that one actually.
yes.
So yeah, I remember when I asked initially, like at the beginning, I was like, what did you learn from traveling? Right? You said you learned the power of listening. I
Yes.
remember that one. So you emphasize listening as like a core theme in your journey. So why is listening so important when like navigating life transitions?
Well, I think listening on a couple of different levels. A lot of times when we're in a one-to-one conversation or even a group conversation, we're not really listening to what the other person is saying. We're spending time thinking about what we're going to say, right? And that concept of deep listening, of thoughtful listening, of really trying to hear the meaning behind the words.
Mm,
And with the disease that Carmen has, sometimes she can't find the words, the right words, and so she'll say something, and it'll be like, I don't think that's really what she's saying, right? She's really wanting to do such and such. So it's when you're in those interpersonal reactions, listening to the meaning behind the words. And that's using empathy, that's using compassion, that's putting yourself in the other person's perspective and shoes, to use that cliche. I think that is so important. But the other side of listening is just being still and listen, taking that pause. Maybe you're just listening to your own breath. Maybe you're sitting outside and you're listening to the wind in the trees or the birds. Or in our case, we spent a lot of time on these trips and in the years since standing next to rivers. Rivers are very important to us. They're a metaphor for life. They're a metaphor for leadership. They're a metaphor for relationship. And a river can teach us so many things if we just stop, listen, and observe to what's going on around us. And that sounds a little metaphysical and all that, but we spend a lot of time on the superhighways, right? Going from point A to point B, slowing down to take the time to enjoy those moments. That's listening also. Um, I talk about one of the stories. We visited the Chapel of Transfiguration. It's in the Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming, and it's just this little log church. And I wouldn't say that either one of us are super religious people. We both have a faith background. But standing in that church, that little chapel, and the view out the plate glass window was of the Grand Teton Mountains. You're just awestruck to silence. There were no words. We didn't need any words. It was just like, oh my gosh, this is stunningly beautiful and hollowed ground.
Hey. Well, Jeff, right? This has been amazing. And yes, this, thank you so much, for sharing your story and being vulnerable, right? I really do appreciate that actually. So thank you so much. And yes, it leads me to like my final question, right? I believe you have a message for people in uncharted seasons. So for someone listening who feels like the map of their life has suddenly changed, what would you want them to know?
What I would want them to know is that just because the map ends doesn't mean that you end or your forward progress ends. Um, there's a great sometimes wisdom can be found on a t-shirt, right? So there's this
Mm.
t-shirt that I bought years ago. I'm embarrassed to say I still have it. And it said something about for those who make maps, not follow them. So when the map runs out, you have to make the map. And I think that's the message to carry forward is that you have that ability to create a map of where it is that you're going when you maybe don't know what's around the next bend, the next curve of the river. My book Uncharted Moments comes out in May, and what I hope people that read it, what I want them to take away from it is, yes, we had these great adventures, and yes, all these things. I want them to see their own uncharted moments, the moments that they've had that they look back on and they say, wow, that was incredible. Or wow, I learned a lot from that. And that's what I want readers to take away from this group of stories.
So thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much. And again, we've come to the final segment of my podcast, right? It's called the rapid fire segment. So
You didn't warn me about this.
no, I don't like giving warning. I like the reaction that comes with hearing it. All right. So yeah, starting now, right? Uncertainty teaches.
Say that again.
Okay, uncertainty teaches
Teaching?
teaches
I'm not
what.
understanding the words. I'm very sorry.
Okay, so what does uncertainty teach us?
What can they teach us?
Yes, what does
Yes.
uncertainty teach?
I think they can teach us humility. I think they can teach us patience. I think they can teach us caring in the moment.
Right, and yes, love grows when.
Love grows when. Oh, that is love grows when you stop thinking about yourself and think about the other people, the other person.
All right. Okay, and listening reveals.
Listening reveals your inner heart.
Okay, all right, and yes, reinvention begins with.
Reinvention begins with taking that first step.
Okay, and yes, finally, right, a meaningful life includes.
A meaning, family and friends.
Okay, wow.
Family, friends.
Family and friends. So, yes, thank you so much, Jeff, Where can listeners get to know more about you and what you do?
My website is www.jeffreyston.com. So JEFFREYSTON.com. They can find out all about me there. And I put out a weekly, maybe not so every week, newsletter with stories like some of the that we've shared today. If people find those interesting and appealing, I would love to have you on the newsletter list.
All right. And yes, need I say, right? I really appreciated this episode. I felt like I needed to hear this and know, I needed to just hear the story. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And
Thank
yes,
you,
to
Sekani.
my listeners, thanks for tuning in to Conversations with Sekani. If this episode sparked anything in you, make sure to share to someone who you think might need it, and also subscribe so you don't miss out on new episode. And Jeff, I'm looking forward to your book. You said in May, right?
May 14th is the official launch.
Okay, so I'll be looking forward to your book, and do have a wonderful day, Jeff.
You
All
too.
right.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.